So while we're waiting for the last of the lunchtime stragglers to join us, I just thought I'd say hello and welcome. So I'm Andrew North. I'm one of the solutions directors here at KTSL. Some of you who I've had the fortune to work with. Joining us on today's session and running it will be Aaron Perrott, who's our CTO. And this is the first of the lunch and learn sessions that we'll be running through the course of this year. We wanted to share as much info and knowledge as we could, and we thought that this was probably one of the most pragmatic ways that we could do it. So we'll try and keep it to sort of 20 to 25 minutes, share as much as we can. Please do feel free to ask questions as you go. I'll be running the Q&A and any chat that you want to put into the chat window. So that will be me answering you or sorting out the logistics, and Aaron will be taking you through his vast experience of more than 20 years having worked in the service management, service integration space. So for those of you who've known us in and around that area, obviously that's kind of our core bag. We're working as a specialist service integrator, focusing on the BMC and other tool sets for a long time now. So we've run large projects around a number of different areas. CMDB is the first one that we thought we'd pick because it's a very pragmatic one. So we're often asked, how could we, what could we do? Can you make it a bit more straightforward? So that's really the intention of today. Aaron, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. So as Andrew alluded to, this is the first in our lunch and learn sessions, and we're going to be focusing on breaking CMDB down into sort of more manageable chunks. So typically CMDB projects are hard because they take a long time, they're cumbersome, it's difficult to show value, and therefore it's quite difficult sometimes to both manage stakeholder expectations, but also to keep the project moving forward and keep the traction. So we're going to talk about how we can do that in very small, simple steps, continue to show value as we do it, and simplify some of the language that sits around the CMDB, so it's easier to explain to the business, but also to the stakeholders and our peers within the organization. So we're going to split it into three sections today, and because obviously it's a lunch and learn, I've gone for a food-based theme. So we're going to start with our entree, which is around how we can simplify the approach to the CMDB. So what we can look at to break it down to short, medium and long-term outcomes. So we're not looking at a 1 to 2 year plan. We're looking at very manageable 12-week chunks. What we're then going to do is look at how we can break the CMDB down into 3 simple principles. So rather than trying to explain what it is using complex language or using language that everybody can't understand, we're going to have 3 simple ways of explaining how you can break the CMDB down into chunks. And then finally, for our dessert, we're going to look at the key areas of the CMDB and how we can engage the stakeholders. And again, we're going to look at 4 core areas that covers all of the CMDB disciplines. So that's what's on our menu today. At the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A for people that want to ask questions. And as Andrew alluded to, he'll be managing that. So let's start with our entree about how we can have an approach to deliver a CMDB to drive outcomes so the business can understand what they're getting as we sort of go through the process. As I've said, we break these down into 12-week plans. I really don't want anything to run longer than that because you lose focus and it becomes quite difficult to drive that change through to the business when the project is any longer. And first of all, you've got to understand how your CMDB is currently working. So do an audit on it, understand where you've got gaps, understand where you're potentially not focusing on some value, look at where you aren't quite sure, where you've got control over your estate. Maybe the business aren't really aware as to what value they're getting out of it. Maybe you can't calculate risk effectively. Maybe you can't do effective cost management within your CMDB. But the point of the audit is to start to look at where it sits on the maturity level now and where you want to go to and where your core focuses are. Once you've done that audit, it's then about moving into a planning stage. What you're trying to do is to break the CMDB down into manageable goals. So I want something that I can achieve within my first 12 weeks. I want something that I can then show to the business I provided some value. So that'd be the next stage, to break that into that plan. We then want to look at the core principle of a CMDB, which is the data that it holds. Okay, that's the core principle of it. And we're going to break that down into three things: providers, where we get the data; maintain, how we manage that data; and then consumers, so how it's used. And we're going to go through those three core concepts in more detail during this session. We then want to make sure we've got the right focus. So we take data in from a provider, but ultimately the CMDB there is for consumers. Okay, we have to have a robust strategy to maintain that data, but we also have to understand why people want it. There's no point having a CMDB and providing huge amounts of data into it if no one's consuming it. There's no value there. So you have to make sure that when you're thinking about what you should provide it, you're focusing on the angle of how that's going to be consumed. And that's really what the focus of our sort of 12-week plan tends to be. We're then to make sure we can assign the tasks adequately across that plan. So make sure that people own areas of it, they understand what they need to do, we get buy-in where we need it, stakeholders are engaged, and that there's a defined outcome. So we understand what it is we're trying to achieve. And then what we want to do is try to leverage existing technology where we can. So a good example is that most organizations will have discovery sources or event management sources or alert tools that they already have. They may have some dashboarding or reporting that they use in another area of the business that we can reuse to provide the data from the CMDB to our consumers. So it's all about looking at what's available and then making sure we reuse, because that's what gives us the ability to move forward at pace, because we're not trying to put in new technologies every time to do something that we can already do somewhere else. And what we do is we base that then on the key drivers. So typically these tends to be around the depth and the breadth of the CMDB. So you might look at the structure or the classes that it provides. You might look at the attributes or the data within those classes. You might want to close some of those gaps. So you might focus on some gaps that we can go after quickly. And then we want to look at, well, do we actually have the data to close them? And if we don't, well, where are we going to get it from? It might be that what you're trying to do is to use CMDB to improve what you do within impact and support. So how can we start doing better impact modeling when we make changes? How can we make our CMDB more proactive? So, i.e., I understand that something's happening. It's currently an incident, it's beginning to recur. What's the impact of that? What business processes are affected? What's the cost to my business? How can I then get on top of that and solve that? Is there some automation I can use to take that problem away before it happens? All of those decisions should be made based on a robust CMDB. So maybe that's what I need to focus on in terms of showing that value to the business. And then finally, and linked to that, is how can we then use the events successfully? And what I mean by that is, in many organizations we have events, okay, so we know that things are going wrong, we flag events, they create tickets, people look at that problem, but actually we want to do a bit more than that. We want that event to actually do something. We want that to either solve the problem, spin up another server, give me some more capacity, go and initiate a vulnerability scan where there's detected a security alert. Do more than just report the event. And we can only do that if we understand what that event impacts and how it's linked to other areas. And for that, we need our robust CMDB. Finally, we want to define what success looks like. So when you report up through the business, each area and each stakeholder is going to have a different understanding of what they want to get out of the CMDB. And that could be something like, I'm a CFO and I'm talking to my CTO and he wants to engage in more cloud services, and I want to understand the cost of that. I can only do that if I understand the true cost of delivering on-premise now. And again, I should be able to go to my CMDB and understand the cost of providing email, or understand the cost of providing my Office 365 capacity, or understand the cost of defining application A or application B. Because if I don't know that, I can't possibly look at how much it's going to truly cost me to move to the cloud, or how much it might cost me to outsource or insource or change the structure of my team. So I should be leveraging what I have within the CMDB to help me look at that type of data. Or it could be something much simpler, which is I have a security audit and I just want to make sure I haven't got any gaps within my understanding of my estate. But either way, you should define what that success looks like at the end of that 12-week cycle. So how can we break the CMDB down into 3 simple principles? So we use 3 terms: consumers, maintain, and providers. And we'll start at the top, which is our consumers. Without consumers, there's no need for a CMDB, because you have to have a reason for putting the data within the configuration management database in the first place. So this could be the ability to run standard reports, to understand what we have within our estate, how things are linked together, what our impacts are. It could be that I wanted some data extracts. So back to my earlier point, I want to understand what it truly costs me to run my email service. How is that provided? Who's impacted when it goes down? Well, finally, the process that sits around it. So an event comes in, I need to action it. I need to manage how I then proactively solve that problem. Do I really understand how that incident has impacted, or how that event has impacted my business? Can I really work out that this business process is reliant on this part of my IT infrastructure? And that's my consumption. We should always start there, because without consumers, you have to question, what are you providing into your CMDB in the first place? Its principle is around the consumption of that data. We then have to maintain that data. So we need to be able to plan the maintenance. So how are we going to control the data that comes into it? We need to look at how we identify what goes into our CMDB. We then need to put controls in place to make sure that it's evergreen and it's up to date, and actually it's coming in from the right and valid sources. We need to make sure we report on that. So we're showing up to the business that actually we have a handle on our CMDB and that our accuracy is at, say, 95%. These are our gaps, or that we have control over our alerts or our mechanisms and what the current status of our IT infrastructure is, where our critical failings might be, where we have maybe in a minor event, but we're managing it. But it's about reporting that status up to our consumers. We need to make sure we maintain that. And then finally, our verification and our audit of our data, making sure that we're not just relying on one single source, but we have a mechanism to verify that it's accurate. And are we doing regular audits to make sure that that data is controlled and maintained? And then finally, at the bottom, we have our providers. So where is our data coming from? And it could be as simple as a spreadsheet load, could be a discovery tool, so i.e. direct, could be from various data sources. Maybe we support different customers, so we might take loads from them. Maybe we have a part of our business is outsourced, so we take a load from an outsourcer. But it's about how we get that data that feeds into that chain for that maintenance, and then ultimately rolls up to our consumers at the top level. So it's how we go from the bottom through the maintenance to the control at the top. And it's those 3 areas which we use to explain how we break the CMDB down. So let's look at some example activities that we might do within our 12-week plan within those buckets. So within the provide space, we might look at a discovery solution that might cover a gap that we have. We might look at a standard loading solution or an ETL, or maybe through a middleware platform where we can control the data that comes in through either a customer or through our own internal providers. We might look at additional integrations, say to things like Intune or SCCM. We might look at where we can fill gaps. So maybe we don't have control over our mobile estates. We might look at feeding some data in from another MDM source. Or maybe we simply need a generic spreadsheet loader because we can't get the data from anywhere else at the moment, but we want to start from somewhere. And some of this will be driven by the maturity curve of your current CMDB, but these are examples within the provide space. Within the maintain space, we might look at data quality. So have we got control over our duplicates? Have we got orphans within our database? Do we have stale CIs that we need to clean up? Do we provide adequate maintenance dashboards? Does the business truly understand how much control we do have? So how we do understand what's currently happening within our estate, within our network, and we're reporting that adequately up. Are we doing sufficient audits to make sure it's up to date? And what we're providing is accurate and a true reflection of the business. Can we provide service and application maps? Do we truly understand where our services run, where our business processes run, how our applications are consumed, and how are we maintaining that data? And then our data dictionary, how are we providing our consumers with the map of how our data is stored within our maintain space? And are we doing effective normalization to keep things consistent across all of the data that comes into our CMDB? And then finally, what's our archiving strategy? So the typical things that would sit within the maintain bucket. And then on the consume side, we might look at how we're using that data within our other ITSM processes. So for example, when I log an incident or a change, am I truly using the right service CI? Do I truly understand the impact? If I'm looking at my current capacity, do I understand where my gaps are? Do I understand where I might need to spin up additional functionality or infrastructure because a project is running and we don't have the capacity at the moment? Can I quickly identify that by querying my CMDB? And then how do I drive self-service in my consume space from my CMDB lifecycle? How do I spawn automation? We then want to look at how we're providing a life cycle up to the business as well. So when assets are becoming end of life, when we might have the opportunity to have more bandwidth, where we might want to move to the cloud, how are we providing that life cycle process? Do we have consumer dashboards providing insights into our data, looking at where we've had critical problems or proactive things that we might be able to solve? And do we have service levels on our CMDB? Many customers don't. They service level at the incident and at the change side, but they don't really service level in terms of the quality of the data within their configuration management tooling. And actually, it's really important because if you're going to drive your business through that, then surely you should make sure you're making the service level of that construct accurate and up to date and controlled. And do we provide a simple and easy mechanism to extract that data? Do we provide APIs over our CMDB that people can consume to start to understand what's going on within other areas of the business? Core area there is DevOps, for example. So can I consume parts of my CMDB from my Azure DevOps estate or from my Jira platform? Am I leveraging what it knows when I'm making changes that I want to bring in quickly to my business? And then finally, event management, as I've spoken about already, getting control over that. Doing more than just simply logging the event, leveraging the data that I have to add greater value to the business. And then underpinning these three buckets, you have your sort of longer term vision and plan to drive up your maturity level. So you might start looking at things like service level metrics, drilling into your change management risk. You know, can I start to correlate incident and changes together, leverage my CMDB to truly understand the impact of a change and or focus my testing on a specific area that I want to release, therefore speeding up DevOps? Is that what I'm trying to achieve? And then my integration strategy, and they'll run alongside the bottom of my provide, maintain, and consume buckets because they will drive some of what happens within each of those states. If we look at one example in the maintain area in a little bit more detail, so the data dictionary, this is about providing a single presentation of providers of our CMDB classes so people understand where they go to get data. It's like signposting the things that I want to consume and understanding where they are. Or from a consumption point of view, I need to identify and update my self-service catalog because I want to make sure that it's accurate based on the services and business processes that I provide those end users. I'm going to use my CMDB data to do that. I'm also going to use it to leverage automation. So when I ask for something, I know what I need to do to spin it up. For example, I log a new project request through self-service. I know that that needs a new virtual server. That just gets spun up automatically from that request. There's no need to bring in any manual intervention. Things like that start to add value to the business, and it can see why I've got my CMDB because it allows me to do that type of automation. And that would be a good example in the consume space. And I spoke about a 12-week plan. So we just had some examples within the provide, maintain, and consume space. So what would I typically want to try and do within 12 weeks? Well, I might look at integrating into Intune because I want a new provider. I've just moved my mobile estate to Intune. I want to capture that data. So that goes within my 12-week bucket. I want to make sure my data quality is accurate. I want to remove my orphans and my stale data. So I'm going to look at that within my bucket. And I want then after that to be able to provide an accurate data dictionary. So I'm going to tag that on as the next part of my 12-week plan. I'm then going to integrate into requests because I want to start providing some integration and automation. So I'm going to start exposing my self-service catalog to my CMDB. I want to get more value out of my event sources. So I want to start using them to plot my proactive problem management. And then I want to start putting a dashboard over the top of my CMDB to show the quality of the data that I have. All the time, this is going to underpin my vision, but I'm going to segregate what I'm going to achieve into 12 weeks. So I can show to the business, do you know what I've achieved? This is what I've achieved. We now have an accurate understanding of our mobile data. I have an accurate understanding of what data we store within our CMDB. I've started to kick off automation into my request portal. I have control over my events to look at leading into proactive problem management. And I can show you what I'm doing through my dashboarding. It's simple chunks that then allows the stakeholder to say, okay, I get exactly what you're doing. I can see where this is going, and I can justify further investment. And I'm breaking it down into things that you can manage quickly and then expose back to those shareholders and stakeholders. So finally, I want to look at how we break the CMDB down to those stakeholders. And we split that into 4 data dimensions. So logical CIs, which includes the service catalog, physical CIs, which includes events, but the things that sit within our infrastructure, user and support mapping, so who provides the support for those services, and then the cost modeling of those services. So understanding true cost, for example, of email. And in many organizations, dimension 2 is usually pretty mature because it's discovery, spreadsheet loads, you've got a fairly good understanding of things that sit within your infrastructure or within your cloud platforms. Then many customers have started to logically map that. They have a service catalog, service mapping, might not go to business process level, but a fairly good idea of what provides the core services within their business. I think where in most organizations, the maturity is maybe further behind is the ability to then say, okay, and how many people support that service? How do I get support for an area within that business service? How does my logical service and my physical service combine as a support wrap? But that should be maintained within your CMDB. You should be able to know that and how to access that information quickly, because that allows you to solve problems more succinctly and be able to spin up things like major incident management much more proactively because you understand who you need to engage. And then finally, cost modeling. So my ability to then say, what is the cost of providing that service? When I look at the physical CIs that are within it, the users and the support groups that maintain it, the services that it provides, maybe to my end customers, the cost of that to the business or the profit that it provides to the business, because that then allows me to properly model the costs of each of those services from the consumption through to the provision of that service. And that then allows me to make decisions about whether I'm going to move to the cloud or offshore with a proper knowledge base that supports those decisions that I'm making. And that is the final step. And there's not many organizations, I would say, that have got that across their whole business structure. Ultimately, it's what the CMDB should be providing. And to break those down, logical CIs is how the service catalog is structured, business services, technical services, discovery, manual capture, service maps, impact modeling. It's all the soft entities that sit on top of our physical infrastructure. And then below that, we have our physical CIs, much more easy for people to understand: our class structure, our kit, our attributes, where our data comes from, how we're reconciling that, how we're federating to get that data, our maintenance. It's much more the physical part that sits underneath. And then our user support, how we map in between our logical and physical CIs, who supports them? Do we have the data? How do we manage our outsourcers? How is that linked to approval and alerts and management? How do we control that? How are we using personas? Do we understand who consumes what within our business? And do we break that down into simple areas to understand? I'm a person in sales. Do we know what I need, what I use? I'm a customer and I consume this service. Do I understand what services I need and what's important to me? And that's the breakdown of the CMDB into that sort of persona-driven construct. And then finally, the cost modeling. Do I understand my supplier costs? Do I have my contracts loaded? Do I understand the cost of my staff? Do I understand my infrastructure costs of what the contracts are? Do I have underpinning service levels? Do they have penalties, review periods? Do I have that data? If I was to provide a report, could I today go to my CFO and my CTO and say, this is the cloud, this is the cost of this application, this is the cost of your cloud services, this is the cost of this customer application that you're selling right now. So I can make better business decisions on how I want to move the business forward. So I appreciate that I've covered quite a lot of ground there in the sort of the 22 minutes that since we started. This recording will be available. So if you want to go back over anything that I have said, then by all means, you'll be able to go back to the recording. And clearly, if there's any questions or queries that you think of after the session, then you can contact myself on the email address that's on the screen, or you can contact the hello@ktsl.com for more information through that route. But I'll pass over to Andrew now, just to see if we've got any questions within the last sort of couple of minutes.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Nothing specifically come through yet, so get them in now if you'd like to ask anything. As Aaron said, we'll more than happily share all the info that we've got, and obviously our aim is to offer some help, advice, and assistance. So if there's anything that we can do to set you on the right path, or if you'd like to run a session with us after today, please just let us know. But other than that, I think we'll call it a day for the moment, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. So, we've got, thank you, Andy. Where would the split of ownership from DevOps to CMDB data owner be, Aaron?
It's a good question, Andy. I think when you're trying to manage DevOps, what you're trying to do is to make it as seamless as possible for the DevOps team to function without the CMDB being an overhead. So in terms of the management of the infrastructure and the provision of those services, I would expect that to sit with the service owner still. What I would expect DevOps to be doing, though, is to be understanding the impact of the changes that they're making and making sure that they are leveraging what's within the CMDB to understand the true impact of what they're doing. Because it might be that what they're doing leverages 2 or 3 service owners within the business, because it may well be that you've got that across multiple customers. So I would split it in that way. So as a DevOps owner, I'd be in charge of my application, the changes that I'm making, and responsibility to understand the impact. But I would then work with the individual service owners that maybe own the infrastructure and security that I leverage.
Hopefully that helped, Andy. Anybody else got anything that is burning, pressing, or everything you always wanted to know about CMDB, but we're afraid to ask? Look, that's perfect. So look, at past, we wanted to keep the sessions nice and short, sharp, and snappy. I give you actually time to enjoy your lunch. So thanks very much for joining today, and we will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.